In an earlier video, we looked at the cable repair ship using an example of a mid-20th century vessel based on the Edward Wilshire and the Stanley Angwin. You may be forgiven for asking why we focused on a period ship rather than the modern-day equivalent, but as modern cable ships are multi-purpose and can repair as well as lay cables, the cable repair ship has become an artifact of the past. And as a museum, we love artifacts. In this video, designed as a companion piece to the previous video, we will take a little look inside our mid-20th century cable repair ship. This is really a little bit of fun, intended to give you a basic idea of our cable repair ship's general arrangement, rather than an attempt at photorealism. Do not be surprised to see a shiny black and white checker as the floor of the officers' dining saloon. It is there because it looks good, not because the Edward Wilshire or the Stanley Angwin had such a design. Remember, the ship depicted here is based on those cable ships, but is neither vessel. So join us now as we go through the keyhole, sort of. First, a little orientation. The decks on our virtual cable repair ship are the same as the Edward Wilshire. On the roof of the bridge is the wheelhouse top, where we find the compass platform, the radar assembly, the searchlights, and the rangefinder. Next is the navigating bridge. Below this is the bridge or boat deck. Calling it the boat deck makes sense given the presence of the motor launch, cutters and whaling boats, although it was often called the bridge deck out of nautical convention. For example, aboard the Royal Mail steamer Titanic, B deck was also known as the bridge deck, despite the actual navigation bridge being 2 decks above it. We now come to the first complete deck, running the full length of the ship, and called the upper deck. It is the working deck where much of the hard work of retrieving cables and cutting and splicing takes place. Another term would be the weather deck, as it is a complete deck exposed to the elements. Inside the hull is the main deck, where much of the accommodation can be found. Below the main deck is the lower deck, and here we find the 'tween decks and the upper spaces of the boiler room and engine room, as well as various storerooms. Below the lower deck, we reach the cargo holds, cable tanks, and propulsion spaces. We will begin with the navigation bridge, the highest enclosed deck of the ship. Here is the wheelhouse from which the ship is steered. This picture is a wheelhouse of the Edward Wilshire. Also on this deck is the chart room and the WT office. Down 1 deck to the boat deck now, and we reach the captain's quarters. Here we see the captain's day cabin, complete with a William Logsdale painting, because why not? And through the doors are his sleeping cabin and his bathroom. There is a cabin aft of these quarters for a representative of the cable company. Further down, and we reach the upper deck. Inside the superstructure, there runs a narrow but long space accessing the cable tank hatches for tanks number 2 and number 3. The superstructure on this deck housed mostly the officers' accommodation, although the ship's office, the testing room, and a workshop were also present. To starboard are the cabins for the chief officer, the chief electrician, and the chief engineer. Further aft are the cabins for the 2nd and 3rd officers, the 3rd electrician, and the 4th officer. These officers, with the exception of the electrician, would have stood watches on the bridge, day and night. The surgeon's cabin, the surgery, and the ship's hospital would have been on the starboard side as well. On the port side, we find the testing room. As a cable is repaired, it is also tested, and to this end, the cable repair ship is fitted with a testing room. With the advent of repeaters, testing became even more specialized, and accommodation for specialist laboratory personnel had to be provided. Here, we see an image of a similar testing room aboard the contemporary cable ship Retriever. Moving aft from the testing room, we find the cabins of the second electrician, the ship's purser, as well as his office, and a sequence of cabins for the ship's engineers, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, electrical, 5th, 6th and 7th engineers, plus a cabin shared between 2 cadets. Down to the main deck now. Here we find more accommodation, this time for the petty officers and the crew. Under the foredeck is the cable gear and winches, but also the carpenters, joiners and bosun's shops, and the lamp and paint room. Moving aft along the port side are the cabins for the petty officers, the bosun, the carpenter and the chief steward. On this side is also the officer's wardroom, seen here with a fetching blue carpet, and the officer's dining saloon, beyond which is the pantry and the galley. On the opposite side of the ship, we might find accommodation for the ship's stewards, the engine crew and the deck crew mess, as well as the crew galley. Further aft of the galley spaces is more crew accommodation. On the lower deck, there is the chain locker and the tween deck store, as well as the refrigerated storerooms for meat and vegetables. The dry store and the bulk store are here as well. Below the tween decks is the cargo hold. For the sake of clarity, our virtual ship has very little on this deck, but we can see the throats of the 3 cable tanks, and below these, the tanks themselves. Aft of these tanks is the boiler room. Into this boiler room has been placed representations of the classic ship's boiler. A mid-20th century cable repair ship used a different kind of boiler, a boiler designed for the use of diesel oil as a fuel. The Edward Wilshire had 3 such boilers, and its oil tanks ran down the port and starboard sides, from the boiler room forward to number 1 cable tank. Further aft, beyond the boiler room, is the engine room, 2 diesel engines turning twin screws. On the Edward Wilshire, there was a platform deck above the propeller shafts where the engineer's store was located. So, this concludes our little tour of our mid-20th century cable repair ship. We hope you enjoyed it, and hope you remember that this is only a cursory guide to a fictitious vessel, even though it is a fictitious vessel based on a real ship. For videos on both the Edward Wilshire and the Stanley Angwin, please explore our earlier videos, where you can also find the companion video to this one, an introduction to the cable repair ship. If you liked this video, why not give it a thumbs up and leave a comment, and subscribe to our channel. It would really help. Thank you very much.